back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. We keep hearing from the Democratic Party how concerned they are about drug prices. And of course, Americans overall, according to polls and common sense, are extremely concerned about drug prices. Well, my next guest is going to explain how the Biden administration has a chance right now to let the public know how serious it is about drug prices. We'll get into all of it with our guest rather than me extemporizing here. David Dayen, I always look forward to speaking with him. Let me get the title exactly right now. Executive editor of the American Prospect. You've seen his work in The Intercept, Los Angeles Times, HuffPost, Washington Post, many others. His latest book is Monopolized: Life in the Age of Corporate Power, and he joins us now. So first of all, David Dayen, thanks for coming back on the program.
Thanks for having me, RJ.
Always a pleasure. And talk to us, if you would, about the National Institutes of Health and a drug called Xtandi.
Yeah, the drug's, I guess, called enzalutamide, but it's marketed as Xtandi. And it was a drug that was invented through support from the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the U.S. Army. But it's in private hands now. It's owned by a Japanese conglomerate known as Astellas, and Pfizer somehow gets a portion of profits in the United States through some complicated acquisition strategy. This is a drug that is sold for about 3 to 5 times more in the United States than abroad. It's a prostate cancer drug. And the annual price for a full course of this is something around $189,000 a year in the United States. Even with insurance, your copay can be at least $10,000, if not more, on an annual basis. And because it was created with federal R&D support, the federal government has rights. When that drug is not being delivered on quote unquote reasonable terms, there is a process by which the government can use what is called march-in rights to effectively march in and say that patent that this company exclusively holds for Xtandi is extinguished, and generic competitors who can offer the drug at a lower price can come into the market. Now, in this case, there are actually 2 generic competitors that have already been approved by the FDA. They're just waiting for the exclusivity period to end. And the government can make that determination. Now, a petition has been filed by cancer patients who want to see this drug be able to be accessed more affordably. And the NIH has said at the beginning or the end of January that within about a month, they would give a determination on whether this process can go forward. So we're waiting to hear whether the government will do this. And this is exactly what President Biden, what Vice President Harris have been talking about when they talk about using the government's power and authority to lower prescription drug prices. This is the perfect test case.
And, Dave, what strikes me about this is we've seen the drama over the past year around the attempted passage of Build Back Better, and we were told there were drug price controls in that bill, as I recall, but we were told that 1 or 2 senators that were blocking this, and that the president wanted it, the party wanted it, and it was just down to a holdout or 2. And yet, here we have a situation where, as you've explained, the president and the administration have the unequivocal lawful ability to do something significant about a very expensive drug. What's there to think about for a month? I don't mean to be facetious here, but it seems to me as if this is a hypocrisy test for the president and his party. Am I being unfair?
Just to be clear, it's far more than a month. This is the second petition that has been filed to use march-in rights on Xtandi. The first one was rejected in 2016. And after that, prices went up even more. The second request, which is this one, started in 2018. And Trump administration didn't do anything about it. But once the changeover happened to Biden, this petition was forwarded once again. So this is why margin rights was put into our day one agenda series. This is the way in which the government can use its authority to lower prescription drug prices. And let's be clear, we're only talking about one drug. However, when the government makes this effort and says, if you're not delivering this drug on reasonable terms, we're going to come in and take your patent away and make sure you have competition. Every other drug company gets that signal. They understand that, oh, the government means business about high drug prices, and we better moderate our increases in the future. So this is not just about Xtandi. This is about prescription drug prices writ large. Because if you're talking about drugs that used federal R&D dollars for development, you're talking about virtually every drug, as you know. And so this is the perfect test case. Sometimes, you have a price that's high across the board. But in this case, you have a price that's high in the United States, but 3 to 5 times higher than it is everywhere else in industrialized countries around the world. In this case, you have 2 FDA-approved generics ready to go. In this case, you have the patent holders have already made more than $20 billion in overall income and revenue off this drug. There is no need, because what we hear is that, you have to give this exclusivity right so that they can make back their R&D. They have made that back several times over. If you can't do it for this drug, you pretty much aren't going to do it for any drug. And that's why this is so important.
And, Dayen, it seems to me that this is also reflective of a shift in our national politics. The BuyDol Act was passed in 1980, I believe.
Right.
That's 32 years ago. It was, to use the sort of liturgical language of modern day Washington, it was a bipartisan bill. It was Birch Bayh, Democrat, and of course, Bob Dole, the co-sponsors of this bill. It seemed, while it to be...
Just to be clear, RJ, the BuyDol Act is where the authority for margin rights comes from.
Right.
42 years ago, we did the BuyDol Act of 1980. Never in the history of the BuyDol Act has the government actually marched in and taken this step. And in fact, there's a whole lobbying group of pharma and the biotech industry and a bunch of universities who partner on research and development with pharmaceutical companies. And they called it the BuyDol Coalition. And they're trying to basically twist the nature of the law and saying that you're not allowed to use margin rights on high prices. That's not allowed at all. And in fact, Bayh and Dole themselves in 2002 said that, hey, our legislation doesn't cover unreasonable prices. But at the time, both Birch Bayh and Bob Dole were working as lobbyists for the pharmaceutical industry. So their objectivity on this is in question. You just have to look at the plain text of the law. And it says that if this drug is being administered under unreasonable terms, the government has rights and can march in and make sure those terms are reasonable. The only question here is whether price discrimination, which is what this is. If you're saying in the US, you have to pay 5 times as more for the same drug, is price discrimination an unreasonable term? I think any reasonable person would say that yes, price discrimination is an unreasonable term to market and distribute this drug. The only people that don't seem to believe that are the National Institutes of Health, who has time and again rejected petitions of this type. the activists have reason to believe that Biden, this should be different, and that it's really Biden's decision, not the NIH necessarily, because Biden campaigned on lower drug prices. Kamala Harris campaigned on march-in rights. She said that this is something I would do if I was in power. Javier Becerra, who's the Health and Human Services Secretary, petitioned the Trump administration to use march-in rights for remdesivir, which was a COVID treatment. Right. So the main actors in this play are all on the record saying, yes, we should do whatever it is possible to lower prescription drug prices, and we should use this authority specifically to do so. So I don't know how they get out of then denying this request, but we'll see what happens.
And David Dayen, you guys at the American Prospect have done a great job, both before Biden's inauguration and since, laying out the landscape for potential executive action. And yet this, to me, there are multiple, kind of political issues, policy issues that come out of an issue like Xtandi, but one of them is this. Yes, I suppose, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts. Yes, I suppose it's possible that a conservative judiciary might rule against the administration and find that that was not Congress's intent. But we have decades of people arguing that that is something that the law gives the president the power to do. And it seems to me that this is one of those cases where even if they lose, there's no reason, no non-cynical reason I can think of not to do it, if only to let the public know how much they care and how much they understand that this is a grave problem. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to see the Supreme Court say to prostate cancer patients, no, because of your birthplace, because you live in the United States, you need to pay many times more for this same life-saving treatment as you do, as you would if you were in another country. I'd love to see them reverse the Biden administration and make a stand, a conservative stand for higher prescription drug prices. There is perhaps no bigger issue that unites the public than high prescription drug prices. The Democrats have been saying since 2006, when they ran to take back Congress, on a pledge to lower prescription drug prices. I mean, this is a perennial, year after year after year, and every year the drug lobbyists extinguish the threat. They don't have the ability to do that in the case of Congress this time, because there is right into the law the ability for the Biden administration to take action. And yes, even if it's overturned, I think that the politics would be on their side in a big, big way.
Well, let's explore the politics for a second. I hate to be overly simplistic about it, but it seems to me that there's overwhelming public opinion on the side of restraining drug prices. It's very hard for me to see why they wouldn't move in a case like this, unless it had something to do with our campaign finance system and the relationships that fosters, lobbying, drug lobbying, those types of things. Am I too cynical?
Well, one thing about this is, to the extent that this is a decision that's made at the NIH, right? Mm-hmm. The top officials of the NIH kind of share in the benefits of the current drug patent system. So there are senior officials at the NIH who are also patent holders on these particular drugs because they helped develop them, or they somehow got the intellectual property, and they're paid personal royalties of up to $150,000 a year for those drugs. Now, if you change the posture of this and say that the government can march in based on unreasonable pricing, that could affect their this nice little royalty payment that they pocket. on an annual basis. So if you look at it strictly on the personal financial incentives of members of the NIH, which has been historically very hostile to this whole concept, then you can make some revelations there.
Now, let's be clear about this. I just want to make sure the audience understands, David, exactly what we're talking about here. We have officials at the NIH, which makes decisions about our drug access and so many things related to life and death medical care in the United States, that personally profit from these types of patent arrangements, however detrimental they may be to the public health, and perhaps profit from work they did while being paid by the United States government, right?
Yeah. And so you're asking them to go against their personal financial interests, which is why I think the advocates say you got to look at this as a decision made by Joe Biden, Javier Becerra, and the top officials of the federal government, not some agency like the NIH. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to say that one thing that's very interesting here is when you look at this in the context of COVID and how the COVID vaccines and some of the COVID treatments have, how those negotiations have gone. For example, we have this contract with Pfizer over its treatment Paxlovid, which is an emerging COVID treatment. And in that contract, Pfizer agreed to sell Paxlovid at an international reference price. In other words, the lowest price of all G7 countries, plus Switzerland, those rich countries, they guaranteed in this contract, the US would not pay more than those countries. And this kind of international reference pricing is exactly what the petitioners of Xtandi are looking for. They want a parity between the US price and the price abroad. And think about the fact that Pfizer collects royalties on Xtandi, right? So clearly they're okay with this in certain contexts, but on Xtandi, they have not. Now, I reached out to Pfizer and they said, well, ask Astellas about this. This is not us, even though they do collect some of the profits.
And who is Astellas? That's the company that...
Astellas is a Japanese pharmaceutical conglomerate who is the patent holder, nominally speaking, on Xtandi.
And walk us through, David, if you can, how they became the patent holder, because the U.S. did the bulk of the research on this, did they not? Was that not a U.S.-funded research?
Yeah, it was U.S.-funded research, but traditionally in the pharmaceutical industry, even if the U.S. government contributes to that research, they do not end up maintaining the intellectual property. They sell it off to a company like an Astellas, who then gets exclusive rights. Whether the US government is involved or not, that company, that private company, gets the exclusive rights. Usually the patent holder gets 20 years of exclusive rights to sell that drug before a generic can come on the market. And, the thing that under BuyDol was supposed to protect not just taxpayers, but but patients, was this ability to say this has to be distributed reasonably. And so that was supposed to be what the United States gets back for its investment in research. In addition to, having more life-saving drugs out there, they're also supposed to be, we're supposed to have affordable access to them. And that's what's at issue in this case.
So we've got, we've got a situation here where, in a sense, we're on a vigil in terms of the administration, whether or not they're going to act. But we're talking about a system overall that, let me, if I may, draw a parallel with another issue being debated in Congress right now. And that is the ability of members of Congress, the House and Senate, to invest in stocks while being privy to information that the public may not have that may affect the values of stocks. Nobody, certainly the leaders of Congress seem to be slow walking or defending this practice, and Nancy Pelosi has defended it at times. But in this case, I would argue that with the NIH, it's even worse because we're actually paying officials of the NIH and then allowing them to assume at least partial ownership for the patents they helped develop. And then their interest becomes directly contrary to that of the American people that paid them in the first place. Do you get what I'm saying about?
There's a corruption aspect to this, certainly. And I think Pelosi and the Democratic leadership might get bullied into changing that for members of Congress. But we don't extend it to the very Byzantine way in which we hand out this patent monopoly authority, essentially, to rights holders on prescription drugs. And you look at this the other way. It's that we're talking about who benefits, but who pays, right? And the people that pay are patients, but the majority of Xtandi patients are on Medicare. So you're talking about the federal government really that is paying for this, whereas they're handing out these monopoly cards so that other people can benefit from them. And they have the ability to change that to not only reduce prices and increase access for patients, but reduce the burden on the federal government itself to get this forward. So there's a whole jumble of things here that if we just thought about it, stepped outside it for a couple seconds and thought about it, I assume any normal person would come to a far different conclusion about how we set these things up.
Yeah, I would think so too. But that leads us to the fact that one of the reasons why I really appreciated your piece, and again, we're talking with David Dayen about his piece on Xtandi, Xtandi. I love these consultants who come up with these things. But one of the reasons why I thought it was so important is that this is happening under the radar. I think a lot of people, if you spoke to the general public, a lot of people know drug prices are out of control and way too high. There are a lot of people out there, unfortunately, suffering because of what they pay out of pocket. And you've described some of the costs of the system. There's additional costs of the system, of course, too. Affordable Care Act covers part of the premiums for people in private healthcare that also see their costs go up as a result of this. So, we could go on and on about that, but it seems as if there's a profound rupture, not just in the political process, but in the media process. It seems to me we're just not getting the coverage of these stories that we should. Am I just not reading the right newspapers or something?
Well, fortunately, there has been a little bit more coverage of this Xtandi issue since I've written about it. I've seen Salon and Quartz and a couple other places cover this very issue. And I think that to the extent there's more coverage of it, and certainly I'd like to see it in some of the big dailies, that makes it much more difficult for the Biden administration to say no, right? I mean, because it's really very commonsensical. Not only do they have the ability to allow these generic competitors, but while there could be an appeal for whether all payers would have access and would be able to do this, there's a second provision of the particular margin rights on Xtandi that allows for royalty-free rights for government programs like Medicare, Medicaid, the VA. And as I mentioned, more than half of all Xtandi patients in the United States are Medicare users. So while the litigation is being worked out, this could get mired in litigation. But while that's being worked out, every patient on a public program could benefit immediately while the litigation continues for all Xtandi users. So this is really a no-brainer. Even if you were the most cautious lawyer in the government and said, well, if we do this, then they're going to sue and it's going to go on for years and years and we're going to do false hope. No, like you would have an immediate benefit for Medicare, Medicaid, VA, TRICARE patients, which are the vast majority of people who actually need this help.
Are we seeing anybody in Congress pressuring the White House on this issue? Is Bernie Sanders, is Elizabeth Warren, the squad? Is anybody hitting them in social media or whatever and saying you have to do the right thing?
Yes. 12 House Democrats sent a letter to HHS asking for march-in rights. It was led by Peter DeFazio and Lloyd Doggett. Doggett has really been a leader in Congress on prescription drugs and prescription drug reform. So we do have that letter. I'd certainly like to see more attention paid to it by some of the more high-profile individuals. We've seen progressive organizations like Public Citizen and Knowledge Ecology International, Social Security Works have talked about this issue. 5 professors at Harvard Medical School wrote a letter saying they endorsed march-in rights. We're seeing attention to it in the sort of academic and progressive organization context and among patients, which I think is really the key here. I talked to a patient who is on Xtandi and how difficult it was for them to stay on the drug and be able to afford it, and how this particular person is decently well off and was able to stay on the drug, but said, this isn't about me. This is about everybody else who doesn't have the same benefits that I do, and as lucky as I am to be able to afford this drug. So yeah, there's pressure being placed, but there always could be more pressure.
Absolutely. And Dave, can I ask you one slightly parenthetical question too before I let you go, which is Javier Becerra. A lot of us were very pleased to see him nominated as the nation's top health official, solidly progressive in Congress, supporter of Medicare for all, and so on. I feel as if on this and other, obviously he can't contradict his boss, the president of the United States, but I feel that he's been very low profile compared to other people in his position in the past. But that's just my perception. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's true. And, we don't have access to the rooms and see whether or not he's speaking up in private. But certainly in public, he has not been a very aggressive force within, an aggressive mouthpiece for administration policy. The COVID situation is interesting because there's this coronavirus response coordinator, right? And his name is Jeffrey Zients, and he's like a financier, like millionaire guy. And right. He's been sort of the public face of the COVID response, which has been not great, right? And it really hasn't given Becerra something to do on that, which is the major public health issue that we've been facing since the inauguration of Joe Biden. So he's been, low profile on that. He did release a paper that was required under the Biden administration's competition order, the executive order to promote competition in the economy. It's supposed to be a comprehensive strategy for how to deal with high prescription drug prices. It did mention this policy of march-in rights as something that they would give due consideration to, but it probably could have been a little bit stronger. And that came directly out of HHS. I think the decision that gets made on Xtandi, I think, is a threshold question for Becerra's leadership. Is he going to override the forces at NIH who may be in opposition to this? Is he going to take action? Is he going to show some leadership here? It's an important moment for him.
Oh, very much so. This is why I appreciate you bringing us this to the public's attention. And of course, we'll have to wait this year and see if anything's going to happen in Congress regarding drug prices too. So it's going to be very much a story worth following. Well, David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect, which is prospect.org. Thanks for your great reporting on this and so many other issues. And I look forward to speaking with you again sometime soon. Thanks for coming on the program.
All right, RJ, thank you.
And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and you're listening to Zero Hour.